The fall of Kaunda could have had a dramatic effect on events in Southern Africa. Kaunda is chairman of the group of frontline states, the Black nations rimming South Africa, and both the South African government and the African National Congress view him as a crucial player in the process of ending apartheid in that country. Pretoria expressed its concern over the news from Lusaka today. Kaunda is a fierce critic of South Africa's policy of racial separation, allowing the ANC to use Lusaka as its exile headquarters. Still, he is the only frontline leader to have met with South African President Frederick W. de Klerk and his predecessors, Peter W. Botha and B.J. Vorster. Kaunda also helped negotiate Namibia's independence from South Africa. Kaunda has always defined himself as one of the facilitators and mediators in the region. Andre Dupisani of the South African Institute of International Affairs told Reuters, "From the South African perspective, there is real interest in maintaining Kaunda's position and using his offices to gain access to other countries in the region," Dupisani said. At the heart of Zambia's crisis is a recent doubling in the consumer price of cornmeal, a staple food in this nation of 7.6 million people. The government's decision triggered rioting earlier this week, in which at least 23 civilians and police officers were killed. On Friday, government troops and police arrested 34 students and closed the University of Zambia here, site of protests that called for Kaunda's resignation and demanded more political parties in this one-party state. In a wider context, the crisis stemmed from an official Zambian effort to comply with austerity measures mandated by foreign donors and international lending institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. For years, Kaunda's government used revenues from the country's thriving copper industry to subsidize urban life at the expense of the agricultural development. But with the crash in world copper prices in the last decade, the government became unable to afford such domestic policies and borrowed heavily in the world financial system. By the end of the 1980s, Zambia was the most urbanized nation in sub-Saharan Africa. Its agricultural production had stagnated badly, and the nation's foreign debt reached $6.2 billion. The doubling in the price of cornmeal, a measure encouraged by the IMF, actually amounts to a removal of government subsidies to make consumers pay a price closer to the actual free market cost. 3 years ago, Kaunda tried to raise the cornmeal prices, but was so stunned by the deaths of a number of protesters that he dropped the price increases and abandoned other IMF reforms. This time, however, he seems determined to stay the course. As in many other countries in recent years, attempts to restructure the economy of Zambia have triggered public cries for political change. Relenting under public pressure, Kaunda announced Friday that October 17th will be the date Zambian voters may go to the polls to decide whether they want one more political party in the country. Kaunda, who has ruled since independence from Britain in 1964, abolished a multi-party system in 1972, maintaining that one party, his own, is the best for Zambia. If tribal factionalism is to be avoided in a nation that has 73 tribal groups and subgroups, but while he waits for the public to decide that issue, today he requested the people's support. "I'm asking for your prayers," he told his listeners in Dola, "so that God can guide us through."